because they've accepted renounced life. Therefore, the sannyasi should be genuinely attached, attached to Krishna and detached from matter, so that they're not like a high-powered version of a successful householder, living very comfortably, driving the best cars, eating sumptuously, and so on. Then it becomes like a career choice also, that people think, well, I'd like to take sannyas too, and have good money and a good car and respect and cute little secretaries and all of that kind of thing. And Panchatattva has quoted, Caesar's wife must be above suspicion. Caesar's wife must be above suspicion. So the sannyasis should live as sannyasis. Now, the householders shouldn't be envious. Why does Prabhupada have a gold ring if he's so detached? Why is Prabhupada riding in a fancy car if he's so attached? Why is Prabhupada moving from one place to another and flying so many miles in a year when I have to stay in one place? One shouldn't be envious. Everyone should cultivate a non-envious mentality, and one shouldn't needlessly find pretexts on which to criticize those who've dedicated their lives to spreading the holy name all over the world. That becomes an offense against the holy name, against the personality of Godhead. So one should be careful. But your other point, one should be careful also to live as a genuine sannyasi, and therefore not give room for criticism. And yes, not give room for criticism. That also should be there. Prabhupada made the point elsewhere that speaking about hard-earned wealth, the grahastas work very hard to get money. And then they give some, out of duty or out of generosity, they give some money for Krishna consciousness. And then if the sannyasis or the brahmacharis or any of the members splurge and live opulently at the cost of the householders, squandering that money or simply not carefully tending to that, shepherding, acting as stewards of that money, then that's sinful. That's an offense. People work very hard to get this money. So this money should be very carefully kept and accounted for and used wisely in Krishna's service. It's not just discretionary income. It's also not that sannyasis, now they can indulge in expensive hobbies and do all the things they always wanted to do for Krishna. It's not like that now I've got sort of a big expense account, and I can try this, I can try that, I can do this, I can do that, I can all the things that I always wanted to do, and just label it preaching or devotional service or something. Very carefully this money should be used. Very carefully. Prabhupada said not even a paisa should be wasted. So the first thing is that the sannyasi should be very Krishna conscious, pure, detached. Abhyam sattva sangshuddhir jnana yoga vyavastiti. And the next thing is that funds should be accounted for. Money accounted for acts differently. It's like in physics, there's this wave particle stuff, and the principle in physics that energy or particles act differently when they're observed. Yeah. So in my experience, the same is true of money. Money looked at, money that's visible acts differently from money that's invisible. When money is not accounted for, when money is hidden, when money is, yes, hidden and not accounted for, it acts differently. Or even when money's in my pocket and I'm just honestly trying to use it for Krishna, but I'm not keeping track of it, it acts differently from when I account for it, when I have to know this much came in, this much went out for these purposes at this time. When we account for money, money acts differently. It acts better, behaves itself better. Like a kid, you don't watch the kid and all sorts of things happen. But if you watch the kid carefully, then the kid acts differently. So money should be very carefully seen to. Also because money has the potency to drag one down. Kali lives where gold is accumulated. Here, the materialist is called Dhanadurmadan Dhan, the proud materialist who's puffed up by having so much money. So sannyasis shouldn't become proud because the whole world can go to hell. I've got plenty of money. Let everyone else, who cares? I'm set up. So therefore, these sannyasis or the Brahmins generally live in voluntary poverty. I had an acquaintance of mine. I met him when I was doing research on my book. He's an Englishman, a householder, who is he's an educated person. He had a doctorate, and he was located in Nairobi. And he'd written a book about Ecclesiastes. And so I wanted to talk with him. So I wrote him a letter and said, I'd like to meet with you, and we can meet here at our temple or at your place, and so on. It turned out he didn't really have a place, and he didn't really have a car. And he told me that he'd been the leader of a congregation in Nairobi, which was one of the wealthiest congregations for whatever his denomination was, I forget, but he was Christian. And one of the wealthiest congregations in Nairobi. And one day he heard a scriptural passage, I forget which one it was. It wasn't from Bhagavatam, it was biblical. But it made him reflect, what am I doing? And he then became the pastor of one of the poorest congregations in Nairobi. And he was an educated man, he was a cultured man, he became the voluntary pastor of a congregation that was poor, poorly educated, and so on. And he didn't even have a suitable place or a car or anything. Had a wife that he had, but I thought it was exemplary that this is not, we don't look for the juiciest plum of a position where we've got everything at our beck and call, all comforts, all necessities, whatever we want. We're meant to live at some risk, particularly the sannyasis, to live at some risk, that I can go anywhere and, well, Krishna will maintain me. It's not that I have to stay here, because here I get good food, I have a good place to stay, I've got spending money, the little envelopes come and all is well. The sannyasi should be ready to go anywhere and not know where anything's going to come from. That Krishna will maintain me. And Prabhupada gives that point in purport, in the course of the purport, that a common master looks to the necessities of his servant. So how much more would the all-powerful, all-opulent, Supreme Lord look after the necessities of life for a fully surrendered soul? So that should be the mentality of the sannyasi, that he surrenders to Krishna. And he has that confidence that Krishna will maintain me. If I surrender to Krishna, he's the most opulent person, most powerful person. Why will he not maintain me? He maintains everyone else. So he should have that readiness to go anywhere depending on Krishna's mercy, and not feel that he has to attach himself like a tick to the body of a fat cat. Krishna is dear. That's comes in the next verse, Priya. But one should not be, so one doesn't have to attach oneself to, like a tick, to some dear materialist. One should be dependent on Krishna, and that's strongly asserted in here. The Supreme Lord is the maintainer of all living beings everywhere in the universe. Why then would he neglect the maintenance of a surrendered soul who is 100% engaged in the service of the Lord? And therefore the verse says that, listen, you just don't need to depend on these people. You can get your cloth anywhere. Just pick up some rags. You can get your food from the trees. You can get water from the rivers. You can live in a cave. Now, of course, in the cities and so on, things are different. But we saw that our householders who went to London and as in renounced life, they were ready to live anywhere. Some bombed out warehouse, some under a bridge or something. They're ready to wherever Krishna sends us. Not that first we'll get ourselves set up, and then we'll find some we'll find some rich people. We'll get ourselves set up, and we'll live comfortably in London. They were so poor that to get into the country, everybody knows the story. The first 2 or 4 of them flew to London, and then sent back whatever money they had to get. They needed to show a certain amount of money to get into the country, so they flew into England, and then sent back that money to the next group, and the next group took that money and showed, yes, we have money, and got into England. They didn't even have enough so that each of them could show, yes, I have enough to meet the entrance requirements. So they didn't go with a big stockpile with all sorts of arrangements. Similarly, Prabhupada, when he came to America, he didn't come with, he had a ticket with food, but that only took him as far as the shore. He really didn't have anything set up. And when he left Butler, he really didn't have anything. He came to New York, and New York, no caves, no rivers, except for the Hudson, which nothing you could drink. But he came. Why? Not for his own comfort. Butler was, it was a nice suburban little town, pretty nice. And he had his getting his meals. He was doing okay. He came to New York for the benefit of others. And that also, we're at what age? In his late 60s, he's coming to New York City with nothing. And he's living wherever, in a Bowery loft and here and there with some drugged out hippie. So that's the example of sannyas, not living pretty at the expense of others and spending lavishly. Panchatattva says, I remember reading that Prabhupada spent his first winter in New York cold and sometimes hungry. Yeah. All right, let's see. Is that all right, Tulsi Priya? Thank you for raising those points. You have a follow-up question. You're muted, it seems.
Yeah, I think I'll pass on it. You've spoken at length very nicely. I'm not complaining at all. I just don't want to take up too much time. But it just seems like this idea of renunciation and money, I think it doesn't only apply to the sannyasis in a sense, because I feel like, you know, I've had money and I've not had money, and there's a certain aspect of not having money where you live by your wits, and so then everything around you becomes a possibility for achieving whatever you want to achieve in your preaching, whereas when you have money, it's sort of like you do what you can do with money and you're not engaged as much. So I feel like this is a subject that has interested me for a long time, just money in general. And maybe I'll write you an email or something and share some ideas with you, because I think I would love to hear you speak more on this. And maybe if my questions might be an impetus to expand on it, and this could be another class at another time.
Okay, but God, not another email. I get too many of them. Just raise the question to the class.
Oh, okay. Well, there's a few things. So
right now, but you can raise it.
Okay.
Or you,
all right. Well,
go ahead.
Okay. One thing is, does having wealth or being dependent or taking wealth, accepting wealth too much, does that affect one's preaching? I would think, because I think of some sannyasis who are very, hardcore, and they're very uncompromising and a little harsh, and they're not warm and fuzzy. Not everybody likes them so much, and I don't recall hearing about them living in opulent situations, whereas the ones that maybe are a little more gentle or conciliatory, I don't know if that's me projecting or if that's actually the case, but I just wonder if that, if that's a consideration sometimes.
I don't think it's a natural corollary that if you're nicely situated, then you'll be a nice guy and you'll speak sweetly, and if you're living in simple a simple life, you'll be more harsh and more kind of nasty. We saw that when Prabhupada was living very, very simply with hardly any followers and so on, he was so humble, he was so generous, he was so willing to extend himself to others. So I don't think that it's a corollary. It depends on one's character. One may be rich or, well, what should we say, well-resourced, but very humble and very caring for others. Or one may be arrogant, that, I'm sorry, you're not one of my big donors and I don't have time for you.
Yeah, I was thinking more in terms of how uncompromising in presenting the message, not so much that you're not a nice person, but that you tell it.
I don't see that they have to be correlated.
Okay.
Prabhupada, when he was unknown, was uncompromising, and when he was the founder acharya of a worldwide institution, he was uncompromising. But the tendency can be that if one is not careful, one becomes beholden to those who are the deep pockets. And so one starts to adapt oneself to what they want to hear. And that's therefore Prabhupada uses that term, tasmad bhajanti, and kavayo dhanaduram madandan. Bhajanti means worship. And Prabhupada translates it flatter. Why should the sannyasis flatter the rich men. Prabhupada, Giriraj Maharaj tells the story of how Prabhupada met with, Mr. Sethi the first time. Mr. Sethi was one of our very dear supporters in Bombay. His story can be found in Prabhupada Lilamrita to some extent, and I'm sure Giriraj Maharaj's book will tell more. But the first time Prabhupada met him, and he was a successful person in construction. Prabhupada met him, what are you doing? And the man was telling, I do this and I do this, and I'm supporting my family and so on. And Prabhupada said, how are you any different from a pig? How are you any different from a pig? And Mr. Sethi thought, yes, how am I different from a pig? Prabhupada didn't butter him up. Oh, you're so nice, this, that. So I don't think there's a necessary correlation, but the sannyasi should be careful not to be dependent on the donations of rich followers who support me because I say what they want to hear. One should be ready to give transcendental knowledge and not compromise. Okay, let's see, there's quite a number of questions here and not tons of time. Panchatattva says, we fortunately have devotees in every ashram who are wonderfully ideal examples of devotional life. Yes, we do. Ideal householders, ideal sannyasis, ideal brahmacharis, even ideal vanaprasthas are appearing on the scene. To what degree should a devotee scrutinize, Rasadas, and examine a situation before donating Lakshmi without developing a critical mentality? For example, if one knows that funds are being squandered, even by someone in the position of sannyasi or even one's own guru. Whoa, now well, one's own guru, one should be surrendered. What can I say? We shouldn't critically examine the spiritual master. That would become a very difficult, puts us in a very difficult situation. Speaking more generally, and one shouldn't use fiscal, what would you say, scruples as an excuse for being stingy. Well, I won't give to this sannyasi because anyway, blah, 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 he's probably not, blah, 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 and I know he uses it for blah, 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 and I haven't seen the account, blah, 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 blah. So I'll keep it in my pocket and spend it on, a new VCR. But one should be intelligent to see if one is donating money. Generally, a donor should be. It's his duty, or it's the good use of his intelligence to be scrutinizing. What am I spending the money on? Where are the accounts? How much do they spend for maintenance, for salaries? What percentage of their take goes to actual programs? Are they audited? These are especially, we can say that in our Indian community, that we have so many devotees or so many supporters who are successful in business because they know how to manage money. So if they see that the temples are not managing money properly, or that the ISKCON projects are not managing money properly, that money just kind of comes and goes in a free-footed fashion, they'll hold back. They'll give, but they won't give with the same confidence and generosity as they would when they see that money is accounted for, money is carefully spent, money is responsibly handled. That's, as a donor, what I want to see. And therefore, on the internet, you'll find sites like GuideStar is one, and there are others that give you information about charities, about who they account to, who's on their board of directors, so many things. And you'll find that the best charities are giving you full disclosure, or ample disclosure of their financial situation, and it's certified by public accountants and so on, to build confidence in the donor that if you give your money, it will be handled responsibly, and not only to build confidence in the donor, but also, yes, to see that the money is spent well. The same principle: money looked at behaves differently from money that's not observed. So I certainly would recommend that if you have money, hard-earned money, as Prabhupada says, that money should be given to causes, to devotional causes, where you can feel confident that it's going to be carefully spent. And yes, that would be, and not be stingy and use that as an excuse for being hard-hearted. But money should be used carefully. And we see, if you look in those notebooks that Prabhupada had when he came to New York, he's recording down to the penny how much he got, how much he was spending. And Prabhupada was insistent on that kind of accounting. Tejas, and he'd be a good person to have speak here one night, by the way, our godbrother Tejas Prabhu, who was the former temple president of ISKCON Delhi, and who had a lot of association with Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada was always after him for making sure that the accounting was pakka, that it was diligent, that it was first class. Prabhupada was careful about seeing that we follow the regulative principles, that we understand the philosophy, and that we're attentive to such things as accounting. Panchatattva says, oh, well, let's see if I'm skipping anyone. Yeah, we have a sannyas ministry in ISKCON that, from what I can observe, has done a good job seeing that sannyas candidates are prepared for that ashram, that they have the proper qualifications and mentality. Yeah, I won't pass judgment on the sannyas ministry, whether they're doing a good job or a bad job, but I think that certainly is their purpose, and I would think that they've been good about that, trying to vet the candidates and see that they are qualified. Is it wrong to ask recipients of charity, including sannyasis, for financial disclosure? That's up to you. Certainly projects, you do have a right to expect that a temple, a project, an ISKCON entity of any sort will supply accounts. They should, and it's not wrong at all. It's wrong of them to withhold them. I know that in Brooklyn right now, a temple which for the longest time provided no accounts, they've gotten on it, and they're just about to publish the 2019 properly audited accounts. So that's an important step forward. That yes, we're a temple, we take public money, and therefore we're accountable to the public. How are we spending your money? We have so many stakeholders, our donors, or the devotees who are donating their time. So we must be accountable. How are we spending your money? We're really stewards for the money that you've given. Krishna's money, of course, but you've given it for Krishna's service. We must be accountable to you. we must be accountable to you for how your money is being spent. Why should we not be accountable? What reason do we have not to tell you? And in the absence of proper accounting, so many things can happen. So many things can happen, and historically, so many things have happened. So it's not at all wrong to ask for financial disclosure. Now, I don't think if sannyasi comes to your house, you want to ask him for his balance sheet before you give him a contribution. But if you're giving big money, you may want to know, how is that money being spent? That's called intelligent. Vijay Krishna has one audio question, and we're about to end because our time is running out. Unmute and speak.
Maharaj?
Yes, sir.
Maharaj, I am having difficulty with the following. The king allowed Kali to live in 4 places: intoxication, meat eating, gambling, and illicit sex.
Mm-hmm.
What about allowing Kali to live in places where the accumulation of gold is happening? Why places like that?
Because then all the other things will come. When there's gold accumulated, when money is stocked up, then all sorts of things happen.
Yeah.
All sorts of things happen when money is there. Then it's when it's hoarded, then we start spending it secretly for intoxication, for illicit sex, for lavish living, for sense gratification. We start becoming puffed up. I have so much money. Durmadhandan. Durmadhandan. One becomes, that's another kind of intoxication. One becomes intoxicated by the wealth itself. And we see that people who have big, big money, the world can go to hell. I've got money. So,
yes, I understand. Yes.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay, thank you. We're at 8:58. We're just about out of time.
Panchatattva Prabhu's comment is quick. Maybe we can go for it.
Panchatattva Prabhu, you've been waiting.
Oh, I just wanted to comment in following what you've been saying about devotees being not only sannyasis but temple management and so forth, being transparent and publishing financial reports and so forth, and that all of these types of things, this type of transparency, increases faith. You know, especially because especially in the very beginning, for most of us as young devotees coming up in Krishna consciousness, we want something to latch onto that we can trust, and we may not be at that point where we're shastrically solid and so forth, so that we can, you know, ride the waves of a tempest and survive. So those types of things are really important to keep faith and help devotees develop and grow and be enthusiastic in their Krishna consciousness.
The one thing is that increases faith. And why does it increase faith? It increases faith because we know that if money is accounted for, then it's that we've got a responsible organization here.
Right.
You know, it's not just that it's like a faith building exercise, you know, we post some numbers, but to post those numbers, it means that somebody's actually looking at the money.
Right.
If you have an organization, you say, well, what percentage of your funds go to this? Well, I don't really know. And what percentage of your funds go to salaries? Well, I don't really know. And how much is going for this? And how much, well, you know, ask this person. And you know, everything's kind of up in the air.
Yeah.
And funds from this fund are mixed with funds from that fund.
Yeah.
You know, money that's supposed to collect it for this purpose goes for that purpose. and you've got somebody there who's really sort of living at the expense of the society, and nobody's saying anything because maybe people don't even know, or the management hardly even knows. And people, you've got board members who are sort of cavalier and doing things on their own.
Yeah.
One or two board members are thinking that, well, I'm a signer here, I can do this, I can do that. That kind of stuff can go on. And ISKCON, probably, you saw how probably was so careful when ISKCON was small.
Yeah.
Now we're a multi-million-dollar organization.
Yeah.
It's a field day for
Field day for temptation.
embezzlement. If you want to embezzle, and we saw that in one of our flagship temples in India, in one holy place. They brought in new management, and the new management, first thing they did was they brought in their accountant from Bombay. And the accountant saw, pipes leaking all over the place and started closing the taps. And all of a sudden, the expenses for the temple just plummeted, because there were all these people who were like,
hands in till.
You'd landed on, they'd gone to heaven, and then they were, they tapped into this source of just money they could get. They were in a department, or they were in a collection team, or they were this or that, and money could just like flow into their pockets and be sent back to their village, or be spent for this or spent for that. And as soon as they brought in an accountant, and someone mean to back him up, all of a sudden, the expenses dropped.
Yeah.
So, and when your expenses drop like that, and you've got an accounts office that's, with a proper accountant there who's seeing things, then yes, people's faith goes up, because now you deserve the faith.
Yeah.
Now you deserve it. People's faith in sannyasis increases when they see that they're living like sannyasis. That they're abhayam sattva sangshuddhi, that the jnana yoga vyavastiti, that they're learned, that they're fearless, that they're pure in their way of living. Abhayam sattva sangshuddhi jnana yoga vyavastiti. So we should, in every ashram, we should be ideal. And yes, the point here that Prabhupada makes at the beginning, that the householders are working hard to get this money, and therefore we should not be living at the expense of the house, living lavishly at the expense of the householders, or using their money in a cavalier fashion, wasting their money. We should be so careful that the faithful householders have given this money for Krishna's service. Every paisa has to be spent for Krishna, and that means it has to be accounted for. Okay, we're now 4 minutes over, and we hand over our microphone to Madan Gopal Prabhu. Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Maharaj. Thank you, dear devotees. Another very enlivening and engaged exchange this evening on a very important topic. And as was mentioned earlier, the Vanaprastha adventure goes on every Thursday on this Zoom channel. And in addition to the Zoom discussion of Vanaprastha adventure, we also have, you can find the links to that on Maharaj's website, jswami.info, under the About section. And so that's the link over there. But we also have a Facebook page for the Vanaprastha adventure. So if you just go on Facebook and you can just search for the Vanaprastha adventure, you should be able to see that. And there's some more discussions there, and people posting questions and exchanges. So I think you'll enjoy that as well if you're on Facebook. Our ISKCON Parsippany project is moving along nicely. We had an on-site meeting with the excavator today, and things are going to be progressing next week. And very likely we'll be having our foundation stone ceremony very shortly. So we'll keep you posted on that. Tomorrow morning, His Holiness Sachinandan Swami Maharaj continues the Life in Bhakti series. So that's the third session tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. You can watch it on Facebook, or you can make a note of this tiny URL. This tiny URL will take you to the Zoom channel for this. It's a very popular channel, and we've had close to more than about 1,000 devotees connecting and watching this. It's organized by Bhakti Center and co-hosted by our temple ISKCON Towaco, as well as Central New Jersey, ISKCON New York, and Gitanagari. Okay, here we go. And somehow, okay, it looks like I got the wrong chart in there. So,
Shall I post Atlanta's schedule again?
yes.
The Janmashtami program?
Yes, Maharaj, you have that somewhere, right? Okay, so.
Yes, I have it.
Oh, okay. So let me just maybe make the announcement. So this Sunday, it's not on this poster, is His Holiness Bhakti Rasamrita Swami Maharaj on the importance of seeing the deity. And then next week we have, of course, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the continuing of this second Canto series with Jayadvaita Swami Maharaj. And then we have Gauranga Prabhu on Tuesday and Ananga Manjari Devidasi on Thursday. And then the following Sunday is Radhika-raman Prabhu. So that is next week's. And then Maharaj, you have your, would you like to share the screen for the Atlanta? Yeah, here you go. So this is the upcoming August 4th to 10th, which is the following week, not next week, but the week after. And so we have Ramapad Maharaj on August 4th, and then Magdi Mataji on August 5th, and Jayapataka Maharaj August 6th, like that. So, and of course we have a wonderful slate of speakers: Giriraj Maharaj, Loknath Maharaj, Jayadvaita Swami Maharaj on August 9th, and the Amrita Maharaj August 9th also at 6 p.m. and then Urmila Mataji. So this is going to be streaming on the Zoom ID, so you can make a note of this, or you can just go to Atlanta ISKCON. It's easy to remember. You can just go to facebook.com and go to Atlanta ISKCON and attend these sessions. Thank you for sharing, Maharaj.
Thank you.
Okay, and I'd like to request Nilmani Prabhu to help us close out this session, and then I'll open the prayer now. Nilmani Prabhu is, let's see, yeah, he's here. There you
go. Okay. Thank you, all the devotees, for joining. And thank you, Madan Gopal Prabhu. Thank you, of course, Maharaj. Again, really explaining the meaning of sannyas and how to understand it and the responsibility associated with it. We don't hear that message very, very often, and it's refreshing to hear that from someone I consider to be a true practitioner of sannyas and executing it within ISKCON in the way I think Sukadeva Goswami was describing, and I think the way Prabhupada would have wanted it to be exercised. So thank you, Maharaj.
I'm just living comfortably and opulently here in Towaco. I don't know.
I don't think anyone else anywhere would think that living in Towaco would be an opulent arrangement.
I'm living in the senator's mansion. Come on.
Few minor, cracks here and there and things falling apart. But other than that, it's a governor's mansion. Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you very much, Nilmani Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Pranam, Maharaj.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much. Jai Jai. Hare Krishna. Dandavad Maharaj. Hari Bol.
Thank
you very much, Maharaj.
Again, lots of love from Portugal.
From Portugal.